Hi there and welcome to the latest bulletin of network news from the Real Agenda Network with me, Tom Burgess. And I'm really pleased to be joined this week by Jennifer Nadel. Hi Jennifer, how are you doing?
Hi Tom, I'm really well, thanks. Great to be with you here on the airwaves.
Well, we're going to be doing this together then, right? And the next bulletin.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've just dropped in today, but I will be part of the regular team after this.
That's great. Now, you've done this before, haven't you, Jennifer? Tell us about that.
Okay, you're dragging up my past life, Tom. But yes, in a past life, I was a broadcast news journalist. I have reported for the BBC. I was a lobby reporter there. I've also reported for Channel 4 News and was ITV's Home Affairs editor. So, yes, I'm experienced in broadcasting. But what I love about what we're doing here is that we're talking about the real agenda, not just the news agenda, which often leaves off many issues of burning importance. So I'm delighted to be here with you to talk about the things that really matter.
Good. Well, it's good to have some true professionals on the team, Jennifer. Thank you very much indeed. Hey, and while you're here, before we go into the bulletin today, you're going to tell us a bit about something else that you're involved in and we'll be doing regular updates about. That's Compassion in Politics.
So Compassion in Politics was founded nearly 3 years ago now with the goal of putting compassion into politics, both in terms of the substance of politics, what sort of laws we pass, in particular trying to make sure that no one in this country is left destitute, hungry or homeless, and also looking at how we do politics. The way in which we conduct politics means it's much less likely that we will arrive at compassionate outcomes if we're constantly in a tug of war over the truth in an adversarial, ugly, toxic environment. It's going to be so much harder to arrive at policies that actually show that we care about everyone in our society. So that's what we do at Compassion in Politics. And I just wanted to give you a couple of updates about our work. The first is that we have got some organisations springing up, sister organisations springing up overseas. We've now got a Compassion in Politics in Spain, in Brazil, in Argentina, and we're just beginning in the USA as well. So we're super excited about that.
That sounds great. What's going on here at home?
Okay, so here at home, we are doing a lot of work on the issue of online harms, which we feel we've already seen the impact that online hate has had on MPs, driving people out of politics, preventing people who should be in the political space from entering politics, and generally making it a toxic, very nasty environment. So this week we launched part of our online harms campaign, which was a call backed by Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem and other MPs calling for the use of unverified accounts to stop. A lot of the hate that we see online comes from anonymous accounts, and we would like to see a system come into play where you can still use a different name, but you have to be verified. We have to know that you're a real person and you have to be accountable for the messages that you put on Twitter. And we've done some polling with the polling company Opinion, which shows that 8 in 10 people would like to see users able to block unverified accounts from commenting on their Twitter feed, and that 72% of them would like to see these anonymous unverified accounts blocked altogether. So we are hopeful. The online harms bill still hasn't been presented to Parliament, but the more support we can get across parties and the more we can show where the public is on this issue, the greater the chance that we can really try and make the political environment less toxic.
And while you're on, one of the other things that I'm particularly interested in that you're doing is regarding actually training MPs and people that work in Parliament, how they can be more compassionate. And how's that particular initiative going?
Well, we just launched what we're calling the Compassion Academy, and it's been incredibly popular already. I've done quite a few talks with members of political parties, and I'm going to do one later today with staff who work for MPs. And our work is really looking across a number of different fronts. The first is, how do we build resilience and make sure that people are able to cope with the levels of stress that they are currently suffering in the political space. And then, of course, how do we act with compassion? How do we build bridges rather than walls? How do we avoid the sort of judgment and positioning that makes politics so conflict based? So, for example, we have a course called Bridges Not Walls, which looks at how to build tolerance, empathy and connection. Another of our courses is called Staying Centered in a Crazy World, which is about long-term resilience building. We've done some work at MIT in the States and have devised a leadership training course based on their work there about compassionate systems. And we also do visioning workshops. You know, what we're sorely lacking on the political horizon at the moment is vision. And without a vision, we don't have hope. And without hope, we get political disengagement. So we have a range of courses, and we also act as consultants to campaigns to try and make sure that compassion is put at the centre of what comes next politically.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's great to get that update. So we'll be speaking together soon then when you'll be back on the next bulletin.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks, Tom.
So in this week, when the UK budget was announced, there were no particular surprises, but loads of disappointment, as yet again the key issue that makes inequality far worse was not addressed, nor were the systemic problems with the outdated unfair tax system. But that smiling example of Peloton man just kept the wheels spinning and most of us in chains. But at least he knows where he keeps his brush and comb, unlike some political leaders. Anyway, so as you might expect, today's bulletin is more about talking tax. Or is it tax or not to tax? That is the question. And the self-styled progressive policy think tank, the IPPR, that's the Institute of Public Policy Research, have a new report calling for certain tax rises now to ensure that a fair and strong recovery. However, sadly, this IPPR briefing does not seem to be on Rish's reading list. Now, the IPPR proposes 4 priority reforms that could take place even before the recovery has been achieved. Raising capital gains and dividend tax, raising corporation tax, and also reforming wealth and taxes and a land value tax. These could make the system more balanced and raise up to 55 billion. So tax is one thing, but 1/3 of the population can expect to fall into hardship by May. Now, on the 1st of March, the New Economics Foundation updated its forecast on people living below the minimum income standard. That's those unable to afford a minimal acceptable standard of living. It found that there will be 1.1 million more people living below the minimum income standard in May 2021 compared to September 2020. This new analysis from the New Economics Foundation shows that by May, 1 in 3, a total of 21.7 million, will be living in families with too little income to meet everyday needs. And within this, 12.9 million, that's 1 in 5, will be living at a high risk of material deprivation. The New Economic Foundation is calling for a living income, a social security system that raises living standards and provides economic security for all, ensuring that no one has to choose between buying the basics or heating their homes. A first step would be to introduce an emergency minimum income guarantee. This is an issue that was particularly close to the heart of the late Reverend Paul Nicholson, who founded Taxpayers Against Poverty. He also set up the first research into minimum income standards, which then became the real living wage. As he regularly pointed out, it was about an adequate minimum income for all families, whether in work or not. It was announced in the budget that the government living wage would be raised to £8.91 per hour from April, and that's up from 8.72, which is a rise of 2%, not exactly staggering. The government living wage is not really a living wage in the sense that it's not based on what you actually need for a basic standard of living. Now, the real living wage, as outlined by the Living Wage Foundation, is £9.50 an hour, and that'd be £10.95 in London. So we've got a long way to go. And while the Chancellor increased the income tax threshold ever so slightly to 12,570, this is still too low for hard-working people being paid the minimum wage who don't have enough to live on. So why are they being asked to pay income taxes? Luckily, some will receive support to top up their wages, but then this is corporate welfare, as effectively us as taxpayers are subsidising the profits of companies who do not pay their staff enough. It's morally wrong. You can find out more information about this report at neweconomics.org. And now moving on, coming still on tax really, capital gains, or how much the capital does gain from capital gains. Tax Justice UK continues to highlight the unfair tax system and call for urgent reforms. On 23rd of February, it issued a report which had calculated that just 1,600 Londoners earned more in capital gains than everybody in the north of England. I wasn't sure how many people there were in the north of England, so I looked this up, and apparently it's 15 million. And capital gains, i.e. the profits made when selling shares, investment property and other assets, are taxed much more lightly than income from work. That means a small number of very wealthy people are getting a huge tax advantage. The Chancellor did commission a government review which recommended taxing capital gains at the same levels as income tax. This would bring in an extra up to 14 billion a year. Now, making tax on capital gains the same as income tax just seems like a no-brainer, and it should be done. But there has been some progress. Still on tax justice, the CEO of Tax Justice Network, Alex Cobban, he talks on his blog of a tide-turning moment in the global struggle for tax justice on the 25th of February, saying that you not often celebrate an outright global triumph for the advocacy efforts of a movement. And that's because a high-level UN panel has endorsed a comprehensive slate of reforms strong enough to recoup an estimated 427 billion. That's the amount that the global super-rich dodge in taxes every year. The panel was launched in March 2020 to study the impact of tax abuse, study the impact of tax abuse, money laundering and illicit financial flows on the ability of states to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Let's hope we get some follow-through from all nations. We need to keep up the momentum. You can find out more about that at taxjustice.net. Now, are you banking on a bonus? Well, you are if you're a banker. The Financial Times reported on the 19th of February that the government is considering scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses, as following Brexit, the UK begins its divergence from the EU financial services regulations. Hugh Hildyard, the director of the High Pay Centre, says that the bankers are bluffing and that we shouldn't scrap the bonus cap. In 2019, the UK banking giant Barclays had 448 employees paid over 1 million and 27,000 were paid less than 25,000. Redistributing pay from high to low paid employees could result in better outcomes for the latter, while the former would be extraordinarily well rewarded, according to the High Pay Centre. That makes sense. With the vast regional inequality and the acute threat of unemployment, evictions, poverty and pressure on public services resulting from the coronavirus crisis, lifting curbs on pay of the already super-rich bankers, almost entirely concentrated in the south of east of England, feels like a curious policy priority, according to Luke at the High Pay Centre, and nearly everybody else who's not a banker. According to an article at inequality.org, the billionaire bonanza bounds on as COVID-19 has made the super-rich richer. It's time for a billionaire wealth tax, according to the Institute of Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. The US's 664 billionaires have amassed a democracy-distorting concentrations of wealth and power as millions have been thrown into poverty. The combined fortunes of these incredibly privileged few have increased by an astounding 44% since last March, according to the latest inequality.org Billionaire Wealth Update, and referenced by an article by Chuck Collins, who is the director of the Institute of Policy Studies based in Washington, D.C. And meanwhile, millions of frontline workers are risking their lives to provide essential services during this time of national crisis, and they're earning less. There's millions of them earning less than a living wage. Now, Chuck asks, how can this be? Are billionaires taking greater risks or sacrificing more than our essential workers? Do the fantastically wealthy billionaires somehow deserve many billions more at a time when frontline employees are struggling through a pandemic to provide for themselves and family? Of course not. Senator Elizabeth Warren has released a new wealth tax legislation called the Ultra Millionaire Tax. Now, inequality.org has done an analysis on this proposal with their colleagues at Americans for Tax Fairness. If this levy had been in place in 2020, the analysis shows America's billionaires would have at last year faced an additional $114 billion in tax. Now, Chuck says we need bold action like this new initiative from Elizabeth Warren to flip the switch on the system that's allowed destructive inequality to run unchecked for decades. Now, there's more on this from inequality.org. And just to finish off, we've got a new feature this week, which we're calling Dumbo of the Week. In this section, we highlight a politician that demonstrates his dumbness. And a tweet voicing his opposition to raising the national minimum wage to $15 an hour, Republican South Dakota Senator John Thune said he made $6 an hour working in a restaurant as a kid. Now, adjusting for modern inflation and using June 1978 as a baseline when John was just 17, that would be $24 an hour today. So mandating a $15 minimum wage, he said, would put many of these businesses out of business. So did Kid John volunteer to have his pay reduced by 70% so as not to put his employer out of business? I don't think so. And the runner-up was the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer, who gave a speech on his vision for the country, which did not include any vision in the sense of radical proposals as how we would get to he would take us to the promised land. However, he redeemed himself slightly by stating the obvious after the budget by saying the budget was just papering over the cracks, with no rebuilding the shattered economy and no plan for social care or the NHS or to address inequality. So that's this week's news. What do you think? Do contact us at info@realagendaradio.org or via our website, realagenda.org. We'd love to hear your views, and if you're polite, you could receive a signed copy of my book, From Here to Prosperity. So what's up next? Well, we're really excited that more and more of you are listening to the Real Agenda Network over recent months. There's always plenty to choose from on the Real Agenda Network. We've got a range of related shows on this channel. We recently added podcasts from Extinction Rebellion, the IPPR, the New Economics Foundation, the Forgiveness Project, in addition to podcasts from organisations like Compass, Compassion in Politics, the Equality Trust, Tax Justice Network, Taxpayers Against Poverty, and Unlock Democracy. A special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. Now, one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's not happening, but it can. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's the Real Agenda, and that's the Real Agenda Network News. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.